Jennifer and I have both heard many different people come and have no idea what it is, but want to hire us as a parenting coordinator just because they've been told it would be appropriate for their situation. So we're here just to explain a little bit about what it is and if it could be appropriate for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So, parenting coordination, um, I think it became most popular first in the US and then followed here. And before it came to Ontario, it was very popular in BC, and we followed BC. And what it is, it's a process for families that already have a parenting plan in place, and the parents, for whatever reason, are having a difficult time adhering to that plan. And the conflict keeps escalating and moving on even after everybody has signed on the dotted line. So, why does this happen? Well, sometimes the parenting plan might be old. The parenting plan was written when the parents first split up and the children were three. And guess what? Things aren't working anymore. The children have after school activities, they have friends, maybe someone has a tutor, just things aren't working. Maybe parent has repartnered and your kids don't like their kids, whatever's going on. Sometimes the parenting plan, the original parenting plan, may have been written in a way that was, I call it loosey goosey. So there's room for misinterpretation, and that will lead to conflict. So, for example, if Jennifer, if you and I are ex partners and we share children, and I say, well, Jennifer D has the kids on Christmas Eve. That's what the plan says. Well, who's picking up the kids? What time is this? Is it 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock? Is it 4 o'clock? I don't know. So people are running into conflicts, interpreting to their advantage or to how they want it to work for them. So here comes the parenting coordinator. The parenting coordinator is typically a therapist or a social worker, trained. I will emphasize, please choose somebody trained in parenting coordination, um, to help people mediate and eventually arbitrate on many of these issues if need be. Um, the idea of parenting coordination is to get parents into a business relationship, a working relationship, to move aside from the emotions, right? To, well, you did this, so I'm not going to do this. Let's set this aside. The kids are the business. We want the business to do really, really well. So we have to get the parents and teach them to work together. We do this, we teach psychoed, child development, how this affects the children, but our focus as parenting coordinators is on what they call the best interests of the children, not what mom wants, not what dad wants, but what's good for the kids.
Mhm. You've touched on many excellent points, and I'll just add that obviously, by your example, parenting coordination is really appropriate for people who are in high conflict situations. So, if they're absolutely not able to communicate together because everything's an issue, some people may be watching this and laugh that. Parents can't decide on 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock exchanges on Christmas, but this is a very typical thing. And, if you're able to have a parenting coordinator who's involved in the discussions, sometimes that takes out most of the conflict, just having that third person party so they're not having to directly communicate. The communication between people sometimes gets so volatile just because of all the emotions that are involved. So when you take that out and you have this third party who's more of sound mind and reasonable because they're not involved in this very emotional situation, it's easier sometimes to come to resolution. That's not to
For
say that both people are very stuck in their positions. And that's why when Jennifer said, if they cannot decide, then we have the jurisdiction to arbitrate the issue to a certain extent. And Jennifer will go through those exceptions in a moment. What that means by arbitrating it is that if they can't come to a decision, we, as the parenting coordinator, would say, all right, we're going to get all the evidence of what you're wanting and what you're wanting, and we will make a decision for you. And that becomes binding, and we're the ones who are going to make sure that this conflict is now going to end and move forward because that decision is something that's going to be made.
So there are a few positive things about parenting coordination, as Jennifer's pointed out. Number one, court takes a long, long time and it's incredibly expensive and stressful. And when you're dealing with kids, you don't want the family in limbo. So, one of the pluses of parenting coordination is things can move very quickly. So that if somebody is not providing, let's say, a travel letter to take the kids away for, I don't know, to go to some aunt's wedding, and a parent is just being a stickler and not giving the letter, we can get these things looked after very, very quickly through our arbitrarial powers. Um, What's interesting to me, though, is how so many people are unfamiliar of what we can decide on and what we cannot decide on. Even lawyers, I get phone calls from lawyers, will you take on this file? And my first question is always, do they have a parenting plan in place? Because as a parenting coordinator, I cannot be a parenting coordinator for a family that does not have this in place. Um, Maybe there's a couple of little things that might not be in place in their agreement, and that's okay. But for sure, I have to have the decision making in place. I have to have the day to day schedule in place. Something that I see quite frequently is I call them the napkin parenting plans, where I do have clients that decided not to go through mediators or lawyers and wrote their own agreements. And lo and behold, there's all sorts of problems with these homemade agreements that they made. So I'll see that quite a bit. But there are three areas for sure that as the parenting coordinator, I won't touch and that you won't touch. We're not allowed to. It's outside our jurisdiction. The first is the amount of parenting time a parent may have. That doesn't mean we cannot change the day-to-day schedule. For example, when the kids were tiny, maybe a 2-2-3 schedule worked out well, but now that they're young, adolescents, they can be without a parent, away from a parent for a longer period of time. We can change that to a 1 week on, 1 week off, or whatever, but we cannot reduce somebody's time or increase somebody's time. We cannot change the decision making. So if parent is going, oh, I should have just gone for that sole decision making, this joint is not working out, I'm like, you're going to have to go with a lawyer or go to court on that because I can't touch it. And the third is mobility. Somebody's met a new partner, they met online, they want to move to Alberta, BC, wherever. I have to say, oops, sorry, you're going to have to go through the legal system and have it done through a judge.
Right. And parenting coordination is very helpful to navigate forward when there is changes, whether it's new partners or it's new schedules that you feel that are more appropriate. But it is a tool to help parties who are having children or have children move forward in a less adversarial way. So
Mhm.
that is the purpose of parenting coordination, and it's very valuable, and I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people get through those really difficult times. But as Jennifer said so beautifully, it's not for everybody, and there could be other things that you need to address through the court system or with a lawyer. But parenting coordination is very helpful if you're just not able to see eye to eye with your ex-partner, and there's always issues that you can't agree on, and it's affecting the kids negatively because they're not able to continue their day to day with the consistent arguing and fighting over the small things that can be negotiated and spoken to with a parenting coordinator.
Mhm. One point I'd like to bring up about parenting coordination that the listeners or viewers may not know is when a family is in the parenting coordination process, your parenting coordinator is available to you pretty much all the time. We're on call. So we ask our families to use a parenting app for their communication and to add us. So something like our family wizard, there's others, but that's the most popular one. And that way our families, when there is an issue, can check in with us right away and say, hey, I'm having a problem. Can you check the wizard on such and such a date? And I can run in there, or you can run in there. And we can see how people are talking to each other.
Mhm.
Then we may decide, this is a little, we got to meet with this person because they're doing, whatever. So we can really police what's going on and monitor and keep things from really going over the top.
Hmm. Absolutely. And one thing that I do want to touch on that you brought up is our family wizard. And I don't want to go too off track here, but there's many purposes to have a regulated parenting app. But the most important reason for my purposes is because I'm able to actually see the exchanges back and forth without missing anything. So,
Hmm.
for example, if mom wants to send me, the latest email that dad wrote and it was just horrible and this and that. Well, what happened before that? And what happened before that? And what happened before that? So our family wizard is all structured and organized so you can go back for far enough to see where the conversation started and how it broke down. And that's helpful for us as parenting coordinators to jump in and try to correct that and to even teach how we can maybe adjust the way that we speak to each other so that we don't have to run into that problem into the future. And that can be helpful for people.
Exactly. And I find that our family wizard, and I don't work for them, but I'm calling that one out specifically. It does have a feature that I like, which is the tone monitor,
Right.
because it will light up red if somebody is going to be sending, um, something rude or hostile, etc., etc. But also, once you press send, you can erase it. So it's a very, very good record.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also calendar things that you share and different events and stuff. And again, we don't work for it, but it's just one of the parenting apps that can be helpful. Email usually is sufficient enough, but sometimes, like I said, it's important to have all the exchanges in one place that we're able to look back on and see things from the beginning. So
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
just wondering, are there any cons that you see with parenting coordination?
Um, Yes. I mean, with everything, there's pros and cons, in my opinion. And I think it's difficult as a parenting coordinator because usually someone is unhappy.
Hmm.
And, as much as you try to be quote unquote fair, but look at the best interest of the child, somebody is going to have a different idea. And it's really important to try to explain to the other parent so that they understand the reasons why you're saying what you're saying. But at the end of the day, some people don't want to hear that. They're thinking that they're right and this is the way it should be. And it's hard with some personalities to give them any insight. So it's definitely difficult when you have one party for sure going to be upset.
And this happens frequently, and this happens frequently. What I try to do when people are very stuck, and it's coming from the mediator background. That's another thing. You should always choose a parenting coordinator who is also a mediator,
Mediation.
because the mediation skills are crucial
Yeah.
in parenting coordination.
Mm.
Um, but one thing that I will always try to do if somebody is a little more difficult is say, yes, I can arbitrate, but I think you know your kids best and you know your family best.
Right.
Like, do you think it would be better if we can somehow find a way that I can get the two of you to come to a resolution? Because people will adhere or follow something that's at least palatable to them because they created it rather than something that they were ordered to do. On the flip side, can't always get there. No matter how good you are at what you do, sometimes there's just way too much, and a decision again does have to be made so the family can move forward.
I love that you brought that up. And I think it's so important that people who are even listening to this know that when they're in dispute with their ex partner, it is so important to try to be open minded and reasonable as much as possible. Because there's nothing worse than having somebody who doesn't know your family as well as you do make a decision for you.
Hmm.
And if you're just able to try to be a little bit more open to negotiating, even give a little, take a little, sometimes it's just not possible. We all know those people who are just, so close minded and will not listen to anyone else's thoughts or feelings or reasons, rationale, whatever. But if you're able to, it is obviously in everyone's best interest to be a little bit more open minded to the situation to try to come to resolution.
Hmm. I usually say Doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough.